The Bladesinger is probably one of the most popular subclasses in all of D&D. It provides the incredible combination of being a melee character with the power of spells to back yourself up. Now, some people do differ on how they view the subclass. Some take the perspective that it's primarily a spellcaster that can use some weapons, while others view it primarily as a martial melee character that can cast spells. I unequivocally fall into the latter group here. For me, I have always viewed the Bladesinger as a weapon wielder that can also use spells. I have also been playing a Bladesinger for quite a few years in a campaign that a friend has been running, and that is always how I view the character and has largely informed the decisions that I make with it. So with that said, the Bladesinger has been officially updated into the 2024 rules with the release of the new Forgotten Realms Heroes of Faerun book. So we're going to take a look and see what's changed, what's the same, and what the new Bladesinger is all about. As always, we're going to begin with the subclass description so we're all on the same page. Bladesingers master a tradition of wizardry that incorporates swordplay and dance. In combat, a Bladesinger uses intricate, elegant movements that fend off harm and allow the Bladesingers to channel magic into devastating attacks and a cunning defense. Many who have observed a Bladesinger at work remember the display as one of the most beautiful experiences in their life, a glorious dance accompanied by a singing blade. Bladesinging is associated with the ancient elven societies that first mastered the art and coined the term. Even today, most Bladesingers still hail from elven realms, such as Myth Drannor, or from non-elven societies that share land and history with elves, such as the Silver Marches. Wherever they hail from, Bladesingers take their talents all across the realms to help common people perform heroic deeds. Most communities greet the arrival of a Bladesinger as a good omen. So we can see that Bladesingers are this pinnacle of grace and magic with a weapon. I've always associated Syrio Forel of Game of Thrones with the Bladesinger, it's just the vibe that I get. They're able to expertly wield a weapon, but also utilize powerful magic to make themselves even more talented combatants. I think this is why I've always viewed them as more of a melee character with spells, since even the description describes using their magic to channel into devastating attacks and cunning defenses. The magic is supporting the weapon use. Either way, let's get to the features. Before we do though, I'm trying to get as close as I can to hitting 25,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you like what I do and you'd like to support me on this quest, subscribing to the channel and clicking the like button while you're there helps way more than you might realize. Thank you. First up at level 3, we have our core feature, Bladesong. This is at least somewhat worthy of note since for anyone who hasn't been paying attention, with the 2024 rules updates, all subclasses, regardless of class, now begin at level 3. So while the Bladesinger used to get access to Bladesong at level 2, they now have to wait until level 3. It's not a massive deal, but it is worth keeping in mind. Anyway, the way that it works is as follows. As a bonus action, provided we are not wearing any armor or using a shield, we can activate our Bladesong, which lasts for 1 minute or until we are incapacitated, or don an armor or shield. Or if we use 2 hands to make an attack with a weapon. While our Bladesong is active, we gain the following benefits. We gain a bonus to our AC equal to our intelligence modifier, our speed increases by 10 feet, we have an advantage on dexterity acrobatics checks. When we attack with a weapon that we have proficiency with, we can use our intelligence modifier for attack and damage rolls instead of strength or dexterity. And finally, when we make a constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on a spell, we can add our intelligence modifier to the result. We can also use our Bladesong a number of times equal to our intelligence modifier per long rest, and we can regain 1 expended use when we use arcane recovery. Now, if you've played a Bladesinger before, a lot of this will feel familiar, but some of it will stand out as being different. Let's go over it all. To me, the first major and most obvious change is that we can no longer use the feature while we are wearing light armor. This might not seem like a big deal, as on the face of it, mage armor is better than wearing any kind of basic light armor. The best option being studded leather, which sets our AC to 12 plus our dexterity modifier, while mage armor sets it to 13 plus our dexterity modifier. The thing is, and why it matters, is because magic armor does exist. Having a +1 or +2 magic light armor that may also offer some additional bonuses is going to be way better than being stuck with mage armor forever. I have to imagine that the core reason they did this is likely because they believe that the Bladesinger was already quite strong, and making it at least somewhat weaker by lowering its potential defense was probably the best way to go about it without making the subclass feel obviously less overtly powerful. The second major thing that stands out are the changes in usage. Previously, it was tied to our proficiency bonus. However, now uses are tied to our intelligence modifier, and we regain a use when we use arcane recovery. This is a surprisingly big deal. I'm not going to say that it fundamentally reshapes the entire subclass or anything, but it's not insignificant either. Prior, you knew that you started with 2 uses of it, and then at levels 5, 9, 13, and 17, when our proficiency bonus would go up, it would scale up until it ultimately reached 6 uses. This is relevant because it was passive. Even if you multiclassed out of Wizard and never took another level in the class, your uses of Bladesong would still continue to increase. Now, this is still technically true in that it can increase even if we do dip out of Wizard, but it does force us to at least invest in our intelligence modifier if we wanted it to. Also, at lower levels, the impact here will be felt more, since most people are likely beginning with a +3 in their intelligence, maybe +2 at worst, in which case it's the same, or better than it used to be. And while technically it won't get to 6 uses at level 17 anymore, the fact that we can recover 1 with Arcane Recovery essentially pushes it back up to 6. But again, at lower levels, that change will be felt more, since it's likely that even at level 3, you can have 4 uses per long rest, factoring in the Arcane Recovery boost. The other knock-on effect of this is that it is likely to impact our ability score priorities, at least to some degree. Not just for the way that the uses have changed, but also because now, as you may have noticed, we are now able to use our intelligence modifier for our attack and damage rolls instead of strength or dexterity. This is the other major change that was made to the subclass that was not present in 2014. I think the intent here was to reduce a bit of the multi-ability dependency. Prior, you'd want dexterity not just for weapon attacks, but also for the initiative and for the saving throws. But you'd be splitting that priority with intelligence to get the max that we can out of our AC boost, but also wanting to keep up with having relevant spell attacks and a strong spell save DC. This change has reduced that by some degree, since now just bumping our intelligence impacts so many things simultaneously, from our AC, our weapon attacks, damage modifiers, spell attack modifiers, and our save DC. Now dexterity can feel a bit more optional, and you can decide how much that we want to rely on it for our initiative, saves, or bonuses to mage armor. It's an interesting change that I do think actually makes the subclass overall better, even if all it's doing in reality is just slightly shifting our ability score priorities. And if you did decide to just go all in on intelligence though, it has the benefit of making just about everything more powerful with the subclass. Also, it might make the new True Strike feel a little bit less required and opens up some space for other spells to be used as well. So those are all of the changes to Bladesong. While the core features still feel very familiar, there has been some nuance here that I do think make it worth discussing. I still feel like this is an incredibly powerful feature. Alright, moving on. Next up, and still at level 3, we have training in War and Song. This gives us proficiency in all melee martial weapons that don't have the two-handed property. Just for context, that means that we can use a battle axe, flail, longsword, morningstar, rapier, scimitar, shortsword, trident, warhammer, warpick, and a whip. This is a pretty significant improvement over the old version, which gave us proficiency with one type of one-handed melee weapon. The big benefit here is not only the variety and versatility of being able to use different weapons over the course of our adventuring careers, but also, if we did opt to pick up the Weapon Mastery feat, we now have a ton of choices available to us. The other benefit that we get from this feature is proficiency in our choice of acrobatics, athletics, performance, or persuasion. There's a few noteworthy differences between this version and the old one. Firstly, we no longer gain proficiency in light armor. We more or less covered this already during our discussion of the Bladesong feature though, so there isn't much more to go over again here. The other difference is that we used to only get proficiency in performance if we didn't have it. Now we get our choice of 4 different skills, which is great. Odds are there's going to be at least one that we don't have proficiency in already. It should be mentioned that there is no option for expertise here, so if by some coincidence we already had proficiency in all 4, then we do get nothing. But honestly, given just how many choices there are, we could fairly easily just plan our character out appropriately. Overall, this is still a strong boon to the subclass. Yes, the loss of light armor proficiency hurts, especially since we can't even really pick up the feat or multiclass into something to get armor proficiency since we can't use it while Bladesong is active. But honestly, I think this is a fair trade and actually helps to make the subclass feel a bit less over the top. You can still get a ton of mileage out of mage armor, the shield spell, or some of our later features, which we're going to talk about in a second. I'm okay with the loss here, even if it might make the subclass technically worse. Next up at level 6, we have extra attack. This is nearly identical to the previous version of the feature. With this version of extra attack, we get the classic of being able to attack twice instead of once when we take the attack action on our turn, but we can also cast one of our wizard cantrips that has a casting time of 1 action in place of one of those attacks. This is obviously a great feature. It was before, and it still is. Not only do we get the benefit of being able to make extra attacks, but tacking on the flexibility of being able to use a cantrip as well just adds to the versatility. The difference between the new and old version is that now it specifies that the cantrip must specifically be a wizard cantrip, and that it must also have a casting time of 1 action. I'm not sure how consequential this is going to be in practice though, but it is worth keeping in mind that if you had multiclassed into something else that does have access to cantrips, those cantrips are no longer eligible to be used with this feature. Moving on at level 10, we have Song of Defense. With this feature, whenever we take damage while our Bladesong is active, we can use our reaction to spend a spell slot to reduce the damage taken by an amount equal to 5 times the spell slot's level. This feature has not changed since the old version of the subclass, but it is probably more relevant now than it used to be given the loss of armor proficiency. The obvious question that I've seen come up in relation to this feature is why would I ever use this when I have shield and I could just avoid the damage entirely? And the answer is pretty simple, because sometimes the +5 from shield just doesn't get you there. Or, and potentially even more importantly, sometimes you get crit and it doesn't matter how much shield would have added, you're still taking the damage. Being able to burn spell slots to reduce incoming damage can be absolutely clutch in the right moment, particularly if we're concentrating on a spell, say something like Conjure Minor Elementals. Since we're reducing the amount of damage taken, the DC for the Constitution saving throw that we need to make to maintain concentration lowers. And that also combos nicely with the baseline feature from Bladesong, which is already letting us add our intelligence modifier to our saves to maintain concentration. This is a very strong defensive feature that has only increased in relevance due to the loss of armor training. Also, by the time we're level 10, we're getting to the point where we are nearing a critical mass of reasonable lower level spell slots that we can pretty freely burn for things like shield or even Song of Defense. This feature just adds another option for the Bladesinger to be able to use when the situation calls for it, and doesn't make them entirely reliant on shield. And finally, at level 14, we have our capstone feature, Song of Victory, which has obviously been significantly reworked. Now, Song of Victory lets us, after we cast a spell that has a casting time of 1 action, to be able to make an attack with a bonus action. I know a lot of people are disappointed by this change, because just getting to add our flat intelligence modifier on our damage was a powerful and consistent bonus. The thing is that now our baseline level 3 feature is already letting us use our intelligence modifier in place of our strength or dexterity for our damage rolls. I suppose they could have just said you can add twice our intelligence modifier to our damage rolls, which would have largely accomplished the same thing as the old version. Instead, they changed it, which has some good and some bad. On the one hand, it increases flexibility. It allows us to go a little bit further with our action economy, since casting a spell doesn't necessarily come at the expense of one of our attacks anymore. One of the most obvious examples of how this can work is with something like the aforementioned Conjure Minor Elementals. Now, we can cast a spell and utilize it for all of our attacks on the same turn, without needing to sacrifice an action to set it up, or having cast it just prior to combat. This is obviously great, and can work with tons of different spells. The downside is that when we aren't needing to cast a spell, the feature is essentially doing nothing for us, which is why there has been some pushback in regard to it, since prior it was just a solid, consistent, and powerful buff that worked every turn, provided of course that we were hitting with our attacks. From where I sit, I think despite the fact that it might not be relevant on every turn, I prefer the updated version since it can just make the play pattern that much more smooth and requires less of a quote-unquote setup, and we can just kind of do our thing straight away. Overall, I'm very satisfied with the new Bladesinger. I've been playing one for years, and I'm actually very excited to swap out my current one with the new iteration of the subclass and be able to feel the differences right away. So let me know your thoughts on the new Bladesinger, check out some of my other videos, but otherwise, take care.